Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey Mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo, and hello, everybody. Mike here. Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast. I know it's been a minute. I've had a few weeks off, and quite frankly, this might be the last episode for a little bit. I just got so much going on personally that I am needing to take a little bit of a break, but doesn't mean the show's gone forever, just for a little bit. And can't tell you how long. I wish I could, but there are 100 plus episodes of this podcast that you can go watch and catch up or listen to however you consume this content, and it'll be there for you. And I promise to be back as soon as I can. I've just got a lot of things going on, as we all do. Life gets in the way. As much as we'd all love to hobby all the time, I cannot. So yeah, that's what's going on. Man, it's a big week in the hobby because we are less than a week away. Essentially, by the time this show airs, we'll be a week from day one of the National. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to go and see all my friends in the hobby, and like a big family reunion is what the National feels like to me. And I'm looking forward to that so much. One part of that family reunion that I want to make sure everybody that listens to this podcast knows is on Thursday night, the week of the National, we are having a get together, a just hangout, hobby hangout, whatever you want to call it. It is going to be at the American Legion. It's right there next to, or close to, I should say. It's about 3 minutes from the IX Center. The actual address is 19944 Sheldon Road, and that's Brook Park, Ohio. That'll start at 6 p.m. We're going to have pizza and stuff there around 6:30. You can meet, if you follow a lot of content creators, there's going to be so many guys there. It's going to be ridiculous. Dr. Beckett will be there. Chris, baseball collector, investor, dealer, will be there. Leighton Sheldon will be there. Just Collect. There's going to be a lot of guys there that just are part of our community and part of the hobby. Then they just love hanging out with other collectors. So that'll be 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock that evening. Pizza will be there around 6:30. It'll be a cash bar. And if you are listening to this, if you can hear my voice, you are invited. And we would love you to come. I would love to meet you, shake your hand, say hi, talk cards with you for a little bit. But right now, today's episode is going to be kind of special. We've been talking with Joe for a little while, trying to figure out time. He's a busy guy too, so am I, and that's all well and good. But I have the pleasure today to talk to Joe Orlando. Let's bring him on right now. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Joe. There's a lot of people here that may not know who you are, but most of us probably do. I would love to start. I got a lot of hobby questions for you, and I'm excited you're here because of the way I collect is, I think, similar to the way you collect, and also what you did and all of that. I'm excited to just get into it with you. But as we get going, can you just kind of tell everybody your hobby history, because it's incredibly prolific, and I think it'd be good for people who may not know to hear some of that.
Well, with that introduction, I can't wait to let everyone down. Look, I've been a lifelong collector, and I never ever planned on working in the industry. And in 1999, I joined PSA, and I had been a customer. I was one of PSA's first customers in the early 1990s, and I was going to law school at the end of the decade. And in my second year, the then president and some of the employees at PSA reached out and asked me if I would join the company. I said, my parents will kill me. I've got to get through school first. So I go fast forward to the next year. a little before graduation, and they reached out again. And, I just said to myself, even though it wasn't a plan, it was something that I just enjoyed personally. It wasn't something I wanted to necessarily do professionally. I said, if I don't take this opportunity now, when am I going to do it? And of course, I've not regretted it. So I went to PSA in the summer of 1999, ended up becoming the president of PSA in the fall of 2002. And many years later, became the CEO of the parent company Collectors. It used to be called Collectors Universe. Now it's referred to as Collectors. And about 3 years ago, roughly, I decided to leave Collectors and just move on to new challenges. Maybe about 4 or 5 months after our acquisition, we were a publicly traded company since right around 1999. We were a publicly traded company. It was taken private. And I then moved on to Heritage about a year later. So spent almost 22 years at Collectors and PSA, and it was just a tremendous experience.
Well, first of all, thank you, because I actually owned the stock for a long time up to the acquisition, and I appreciate all the hard work you did to make me some money. So thank you. I did very well with the stock, but thank you for that. So you mentioned being a lifelong hobbyist. When you were a kid, what did you collect, and how did that evolve? I have many questions. I'm going to ask them all because they'll all kind of flow together. But what did you collect as a kid? As you got into, you're in law school, right? And they're pursuing you. What is it that you felt you could bring to the table with Collectors, PSA, that made that an attraction when you could have gone and been a lawyer? Like, why did you said, if I'm going to do it now, but there had to be more than just that relatively simple answer. So start with kid and move up through time.
Remind me about the second half of that question when I forget about it.
I will. No worries.
So when I was a kid, I mean, like a lot of other, kids of my generation, I was born in 71. So in the 70s, I started with baseball cards. And I remember my first 2 cards. My parents took me into, it was the Cherry Hill Mall at the time. And it was one of those sort of all-encompassing collectible shops. They had coins, they had stamps, they had, a little baseball card section. And my parents bought me a 1960 Topps Sandy Koufax that looked like your dog picked his teeth with it. It wasn't in great shape. And a 1975 Topps Jay Johnstone. And people are probably wondering, why a 1975 Topps Jay Johnstone? He was a local favorite at that time because I grew up kind of in the New Jersey area, at least at that time. And he was a local Phillies player and a big personality. So those are my first 2 cards. Still to this day, my favorite set is the 1975 Topps set, near and dear to my heart. Of course, if I tried to assemble that set in PSA 10s based on our last auction results, I would be divorced very quickly. Because it would take every nickel I have and then some to buy it in high grade. But that's how I got started. So just probably the kind of typical experience from a young boy during that generation, going down to the local 7-Eleven, opening packs, trading with friends. But I started with baseball cards.
And then did you have a gap in high school or college where you your cards just sat in the closet for a little while, or did you kind of consistently collect to some degree?
I kept collecting pretty consistently to some degree. When I got in, I would say that when I got into college, it slowed down a little bit, but I sort of gradually went back in time to vintage. So again, like a lot of other young kids, you start with the current cards. That's what you do. But I always had a fascination with history and vintage. And so over the next, going from the mid 1970s into the 80s, and when the hobby started to explode, I started to gradually move back more into vintage and really fell in love with that. But then in college, slowed down a little bit to a degree, and then kind of started branching out into different things in the 1990s, a little bit of memorabilia, end cards, and took it from there.
Gotcha. And so then you're in law school. This is the second half of the question I'm reminding you as you asked. You get into law school. You're about to finish. and collectors PSA keeps coming after you, like, hey, come work for us. What about, I'm just curious, why'd they keep coming after you? Did you have some unique skill, or was this because you were a customer and they knew you well, or what created that connection, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess you'd have to ask them, but no, in the early days, they got to know me just at the shows, and I was, local, and I had submitted a little bit. And then also I had contributed some articles to the company, and also like SCD and some other publications. And I think just in getting to know them and the organization getting to know me, they just felt like I kind of knew my stuff in the hobby, and that I could offer some different sort of different skill set to the company. So at the time when I was first hired, I was kind of a little bit of everything, but technically my first job description there was content manager. So it was to basically take, for those who were active back in those days when PSA first started, they had introduced this black and white, which then became a blue and white newsletter that was the SMR at the time, the Sports Card Market Report. And then they wanted to develop that into a full-fledged publication, a real magazine with articles and some depth to it, and also develop the content on the website. So that was my first role there when I joined in 1999, but I was involved in a lot of other things as well.
Okay. And so it's a shame that PSA didn't really, not much happened there in your tenure. That's a shame. Just kidding. Right. I mean, the grading world exploded, and that happened long before the pandemic. Everybody thinks it's a pandemic thing. It's not. It happened long before that. Maybe talk about those early years as you moved your way up to become the president of PSA, and what were your challenges growing? What were, like, okay, we keep getting cards. What were your challenges in building market share, in trying to get people to, kind of just agree that grading's okay? Like, this is an okay thing to do in the hobby. Because I know you probably got a lot of resistance from even guys like me. I was not a grading guy. I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Like, this is so stupid. And then I'll tell you, Joe, I started doing the 300 Great Cards by Mike Payne, that book that he put out. And I started buying all the cards raw. And that was no big deal for buying the 90s stuff. And I go, okay, fine. Then I started getting into some Manals and some other things. I'm like, I think I'd rather just buy these graded, because I want to know that it's a real card. I want to know the grade. And I started buying a few of them graded. And I'm like, this is like, God, 15, 20 years ago. And I was like, okay, I really like this. Then I discovered that there was a set registry for it. I'm like, oh man, I'm in. I got my checklist. I've got, there's other guys doing this. Like, how quick and compare, and like, how am I doing? Not from I need to be number one, although there are plenty of guys that are like that with the set registry. I wasn't one of those. I do like seeing my name higher than others, but it was more about getting all of the cards. I wanted the 100% completion was my goal, not necessarily the highest set rating. And so all of that was happening under your watch, your beginning of that. So maybe what challenges I'll start with what challenges did you guys face at the beginning when you were like going, okay, how do we get people to go, this is a good idea?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, so cut me off whenever you see fit. So as you've pointed out, which, it just makes me feel old, I guess, is that a lot of people who have jumped into the hobby the last several years think that this most recent explosion is like the first time that any of this has ever happened. It's like, no. 1998 to 2001, McGuire Sosa, the .com boom. The emergence of platforms like eBay was just starting to gain some traction. There was a lot going on at that time. So I jumped in right when that, I would call that the first major sort of grading explosion. So when I first jumped on board, let me tell you, it was the growing pains were rough. I mean, because just to ramp up from where it was for several years to post 98 was amazing. So just, this is a statistic I've shared many times before, but I think it really makes the point. From 1991, when PSA first opened its doors, to 1998, PSA graded a total of roughly 1 million cards. From 1998 forward, they never graded fewer than 1 million a year. And at that time, that was a big number. Now, we all know today they grade 1 million plus a month. But again, going back in those days, that was a big moment for the company and for the hobby. So growing pains were pretty tough at first. When I actually got involved, you mentioned the set registry, and when I took over PSA in 2002, that's when the modern market really took a nosedive. So 98 to 2001, again, McGuire, Sosa, Bonds, Griffey, you had the introduction of like the first Upper Deck Tiger Woods card. There was a lot of energy and excitement in the modern market. By 2002, you know, the wheels had come off to a degree in the modern market. And so we weren't getting that volume anymore. So one of the things that we introduced around that time was the set registry. And I want to give credit where credit is due. The set registry was actually developed inside of PCGS, which was PSA's sister company in coins. They're the #1 coin grading service in the world. So David Hall, the founder of Collectors and PSA and PCGS, worked with a team to develop the PCGS set registry. When we saw that concept, when we saw, I mean, it just like resonated immediately. It was like, wait a minute, talking to David and others, let's get this going for PSA. And I think the thing that I love about the set registry, and it's kind of near and dear to my heart, is that it goes to the sort of core of what collectors are. You already pointed it out earlier. What is collecting? It's establishing a theme or a set and checking things off the list and working towards completion, working towards upgrading, finding a way to improve the quality of that collection. That's what we do. I mean, I'm a collector. That's how we're wired. And so the thing that I loved about it is that it wasn't a gimmick. It actually it was something that collectors were already doing. We just wanted to create a community with it. And, you know, you mentioned the competition. Definitely there's a competitive element to it. But from a business standpoint, I think the thing that I loved about it and others loved about it at Collectors was the fact that, look, even though it was free to do, you had the only way you could play is to have your stuff graded by PSA. I didn't mean that to rhyme, but it ended up coming out that way. But I'm a rapper. You didn't know that. But
Right.
But that was the only way you could participate. So sort of indirectly, it helped people stay loyal to the brand. So so again, when I took over in 2002, the set registry was a really big part of our ramp up from that point forward. But the other thing that I really wanted to do is, obviously PSA is known for card grading. That's the high volume part of the business, and it always will be. But we wanted to become a one-stop shop. So we started introducing other authentication and grading services along the way for Type 1 photos and tickets and we never had encapsulated autographed cards before. We started doing that. Game used bats. I mean, you name it. We started introducing all of these other things because the one thing that I know as a fellow collector and knowing many, many collectors in my life is that we love uniformity. So the thought was, if we can make it a one-stop shop where someone could take care of their autographs and their cards and their tickets and their packs and everything else, then it'll just really enhance the brand in the long term.
Yeah, I'm a big uniformity guy. Everybody asks me, why don't you switch to another grading SGC, pick your poison. And it's not that I love SGC. Peter's a great guy. I think they're a great company. I'm too deep. I'm in way too deep. This whole case back here I made this case custom to only hold PSA slabs. It doesn't hold SGC slabs. So I'm in so deep, and I love the uniformity of it. And so to me, I think you guys really hit a nerve with collector. I mean, you knew it. You were a collector too. You understood this weird brain that we all have. You saw instantly that it would translate from coins. It could be true for comic books or you name it. We all are this way. This is the way our brains work. We want organization and checklists, and it's a weird brain we have, but we do. And to me, the set registry has always been such a fun thing. I've been an advocate for a long time for some type of universal set registry where it'd be, I know why you guys, I say you're not part of PSA, but I know why PSA is so protective of the set registry, because it does create brand loyalty, no question, and incredibly brilliant from a business standpoint. As a collector, I'm like, hey, I'm going to get the odd SGC card every once in a while, or Beckett slap, pick your thing. And I'd like them to all be in one thing. But I think that even if I had the universal set registry, if that did exist, and God, the programming to do that, oh my gosh. But if you had that somewhere just as an independent site, I think I would still grab it. In fact, I know I would, because I still want them all to look the same. You know what I mean? I still have a problem with, I call them Frankenstein collections. If you don't care, if you're slabnostic, and you don't care what your card's encased in, that's fine. And I know plenty of people that are that way. They'll pull their cards out and it drives me nuts. Visually, I just like, no, I can't. What are you doing? And so I think that's smart that PSA has been protective. I'm curious what'll happen since they've acquired SGC, that Collectors has acquired SGC. Will there be a more movement towards kind of that universal? You can use either one, or you can, we'll see how that develops. I know you're not privy to that anymore, but what a cool time in the hobby to be involved in, to see that all happen, to be a critical figure in developing that side of the world. Did you ever imagine that, again, you guys, million cards up to a certain time, then a million cards a year, and now they're doing a million a month? Did you ever see card grading really, even in your wildest dreams, could you see card grading being as popular as it is today back then?
Let me say this, because I've always been bullish on it. And when I first encountered PSA at a show, and I remember it was a local show here in California in 1991, and there was a young guy behind the table. It was actually, I believe he was, my age or younger, with a couple of brochures and a little display. And I was first introduced to the concept. It clicked with me then. Now, I would be lying to you if I said that I thought it was going to explode in the way it did kind of during that whole COVID time. Nobody saw that coming, not to that degree. But it always resonated with me from the very beginning, and I thought it just made sense. And believe me, being an active collector back in the 1990s, before PSA gained traction, I've heard it all, of why, oh no, I don't want to do it. But it just made sense for the market to get to the next level. So I would say on the sheer number of cards, I would be lying to you if I told you that I thought it was going to get there and that quickly. But I've always been very bullish on the concept. And that's, by the way, I know this is a card program here, but I feel the same way about anything in the hobby that can be helped by third-party authentication and grading. It's like, if we want the industry to go to another level, you need that third-party certification in everything where it can be done. So I've always felt strongly about that, because I tell you, again, I know I'm going off here, but being one of the things that was helpful for me going to Collectors and PSA is even though I wasn't a coin collector growing up, I had a chance to see PCGS and witness and observe the coin market, to see what are some of the good things going on in that market that we don't have. Coins was light years ahead of sports in terms of information, content. You could walk into it. Now, this is going back to those times, but you could walk into a bookstore in those days. Again, I'm going back 25, 30 years ago, and there would be tons of books about coin collecting. And all there was in the sports section, it would be, maybe you would find a Beckett guide, like one of those annual Beckett price guides. That was about it. And I'm thinking to myself, I know that sports, I keep using the word resonates, but it resonates. It connects more people than coins does. Why is there so much content about coin collecting versus sports. There's so much potential in this market. And to see that happen, over the last several years, really the last decade, it's been really not just rewarding on the professional front, but again, as a lifelong collector, the way I would put it is it's about time that this happened in the sports side of the market, because I can guarantee most people, if you go to a barbecue, if you're at work and you're just talking with, the average person, sports connects people in a way that most of these other collectible fields can't do. It just doesn't happen in those fields. And that's why there's so much. I always felt that there was so much potential in the sports market.
You're right. It's fascinating to hear that growth, hear the optimism that you had even back then. And I've always loved cards. Like, right, I started in 81, so not far. I was born in 73, so I'm not that much younger than you. We're the same generation and going through it. And again, grading wasn't a big deal. It's such a huge deal now. And I wonder if in the near future, will there be almost like a backlash? Are we going, I hear people all the time, I hate grading, period. I'll never do it. And that's even now, 2024, people are saying that. Or I used to be a grading guy and now I don't want to do it anymore. All the grading companies are scamming us and they, da-da-da-da. And I think it's because obviously the prices have gone up to grade things, it costs more. I remember getting PSA, hey, $5 to grade your cards. I remember getting those emails and I still even thought, God, $5, I'd kill to get $5 grading now, as would most people. And it's almost like this counter movement against grading is starting to well up. I don't think it'll really matter overall because too many people are into it, but it's just a fascinating little, I guess it's always, there's going to be people that don't like something, right? No matter how good you are at it or whatever, how successful it is, there's always going to be those. There's people that don't like Taylor Swift, for example, and she's right? I guess, yeah, there's probably some people that don't like Taylor Swift. But yeah, now in grading got so popular, right, Joe, certainly let's just take from the boom, right? 19, 20, 21. Felt like there were card grading companies popping up out of every nook and cranny of the hobby. I'm like, there's no way these companies are all going to be sustainable. It's just, there's zero chance. There's not enough. There's just not enough. The pie is not that big. So what do you think led to, obviously, card company or a grading company can think, we can do it better. We're the latest, greatest technology, the whatever. And I'm not going to call any of them out individually. We all know who they are. And they came along and they're not making really a dent. Why is it so hard to get into the card grading world?
It's a great question. And let me say this, for those, again, of my age and my experience being active in those late 90s, early 2000s, we've seen this movie before. So people, again, a lot of these new people that have come into the hobby, back in those days, there were probably 36 grading services that just popped up overnight in that time period, in that 98 to 2001 time period, including, by the way, for those who don't know, Raleigh Fingers started a grading service where it had the mustache on the label. I'm not kidding. I mean, you could find some really interesting, now defunct companies that tried their hand at it back then. And like you said, most of them failed, and it ended up being just really PSA, SGC, and Beckett from that point forward. Now we have this new surge. There's a lot of money being injected into the hobby, which is a great thing. And a lot of companies that are trying it again. And we're going to be at the National in a week, and we'll see a number of them there trying to gain traction. The reason it's so hard is what we talked about earlier, is that when the brand is built up and you gain that much market share, and knowing, again, most collectors, not all collectors, but most collectors love uniformity like you do and I do. Once that brand has been established inside of your collections, now you have a lot of it invested in that brand. It's not just the cards and the memorabilia. You are now invested in that brand. And that's why the barrier to entry is so high once you get there. And it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get to that point. But once you get there, obviously, I'm sure that's why the new ownership at Collectors saw, Collectors and PSA as such an attractive business, is that when you get to that point where now your market share is so high, it's really hard to undo that. No matter how, cool your holders look, or your labels, or how much money you pour into marketing, or how good your staff is. That's all good, but the brand, being able to overcome that brand once it becomes entrenched in any market, and this is true of really any business, not just the hobby, that's a big mountain to climb. So the one thing I would say is that whoever's in it today, and like you said, there are several that have clearly spent a lot of money. They better be in it for the long haul, because it's going to take time to make any dent, as you used the word dent earlier, to make any dent in market share, because PSA is not letting its foot off the gas. That's for sure. If anything, they're trying to inject more money, more technology into the company to make it even better. I love some of the things that they've done the last couple of years, and it's a big challenge for anyone. And I promise you, I'm not saying that as a biased former PSA person. I'm just saying that just business in general, once you get there, you've earned that point in any market. It's really difficult to overcome that.
I'm going to try an analogy on you. I've literally this just popped in my brain, but I hear people, I wouldn't even say criticize. They're just more trolls, I guess, really. But why do you like PSAs? Why do and I'm like, well, I drank Coke all my life, right? And there could be another soda company that comes out with a soda that's similar to Coke. It might taste better, it might be cheaper, but I'm still going to drink Coke, and it's just because that's what I've been doing for so long. I'm going to drink Coca-Cola. I'm not going to drink the new, better tasting, cheaper alternative. Even if they're sitting right next to the shelf, I'm going to go for that red can and grab that Coca-Cola, because that's what I know and that's what I like. Even if it sometimes, what if Coca-Cola came out and they had, some scandal about contaminated Coke, and you better not drink Coke for, we got to recall all this. I'd still go buy Coke. If the other thing, and that's what's kind of, people criticize PSA when you're doing the numbers they do. It's very difficult to hear about, when you're dealing with humans, you're going to have mistakes. You dealt with that probably your entire career. You heard all the complaints, right? Because you're the guy where the buck stopped with. And so to me, it seems like when you're doing that much volume, they might only mess up 1 out of 10,000 cards, but that's the one you hear about. That's the mistake that gets, propagated in the social media world that we live in today. You don't hear about the 99,000 other ones that are just fine, because nobody complains when it's fine, right? So it's funny to see. I've been in the hot, I've been similar paths. You've been involved significantly more, but as an outsider watching and observing grading from day one, it's been a fascinating thing to observe and just be a part of. And, I have my opinions on it, and I still love grading, and they screw up, and that's, it's, gosh, I'll complain about it, but it doesn't. And then people are like, well, how do you keep giving them your money? It's the Coke on the shelf, man. I'm just going to grab it. And I don't care if that's right or wrong. I don't care what other people think. I'm going to keep doing it. And that's what I enjoy doing. And there you go. That's kind of my answer to people. And they just think I'm an idiot. So that's okay.
One of my favorite quotes, of course, it's Yogi Berra, is when asked about a restaurant, he said, "Oh, no one goes there anymore. It's too crowded."
Right.
I feel like that's applicable here. Look, you're always going to have detractors. You're always going to have people point out the one mistake here and one mistake there. At the end of the day, as collectors, there will be a time to sell or trade some of the things that you have. And what do you want? You want the most resale value. How do you get to the most resale value? You get there with the largest market share. You want as many potential buyers for what you have as possible. So how do you get there? You go with the biggest brand. I mean, it's that simple. Again, as you pointed out, there could be, other factors, positives and negatives about this company or that company. But at the end of the day, we're talking about things that have value. And in some cases, of course, because the industry has exploded, I mean, major value. And what do you want when it comes time for you to trade or for you to sell? What do you want? The best way to maximize the value of what you have. And again, it's not rocket science, but you want to go with the brand that can reach the most potential buyers. In many cases, and whether it's cards or autographs or type 1 photos or bats or whatever it is, that's PSA at this point. And so it just sort of, it just is what it is.
Well, speaking of reaching the most potential buyers, let's shift the conversation to auction houses, which is what area you're in now in the hobby. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I discovered a few auction houses, Heritage, Love of the Game. There's a few that I started watching, and I was able to get some smoking deals back in the day when it felt like those were either super big money things, right? And marketing and all that, but the kind of low hanging fruit that I would find also included in those auctions was stuff that I wanted to get. And I was able to pick up some absolutely amazing things through auction houses. And over the boom, and even maybe even a little bit before that, we've seen auction houses become more prevalent in the hobby. More and more people know about them because more and more people are talking about, look at what I got at Heritage, or look at what I got at XYZ auction house. And it's attracted more people to check that out. What types of growth are you seeing, particularly at Heritage, in the sports market, in the sports world? Has it blown up similarly to grading? Do you see more and more people using auction houses today?
Yeah. So with Heritage, and I've been there now, for almost 2 years, coming up this August, the beginning of August. Look, Heritage isn't. We're certainly not eBay. So our business model is more built around the higher value material on the whole. We do have weekly auctions as well, where you could sell things that are worth hundreds of dollars versus tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars.
Right.
And for those who don't know, we have this auction coming up in August, and you'll see the preview out at the National that I'm sure is going to blow most people's minds when we have many 6, 7, and believe it or not, 8-figure items that are going to be out on display. It's pretty remarkable. So from our vantage point at Heritage, it's a different approach than some of these newer platforms that have popped up in the last few years that are going for more of the lower dollar, higher volume trades. So I see there's obviously explosion in both. There's more people participating. I mean, many more people participating in the modern market, in that, under $100 or $200 market today. And that's where a lot of these newer platforms have popped up. But you're also seeing a lot of new money come into the high-end market. And that's kind of our bread and butter at Heritage. And so what we're seeing is greater participation at that level. And that's what has resulted in some of these, record prices and barriers being, price barriers being broken through, over the past few years, where, if you would have asked somebody, 10, 15, 20 years ago, would we see a card sell for $12.6 million? They probably would have said, no, not in our lifetimes. And that barrier was broken a couple of years ago. And now we have an item on the memorabilia side in our upcoming auction that we think will surpass that, and by a wide margin. So I think that as more information has come out, and I'm a big content guy. I love content, especially when it's quality content. The more we can educate buyers, the more content that's out there, and the more that third-party authentication and grading has gained traction and been helpful to the hobby, it makes it a lot easier for that next guy that's thinking about jumping into the market to open his wallet. He's going to feel more comfortable about it because he's going to know more about what he's buying, And he's also going to know that credible third-party brands have reviewed and certified the items that he's going to buy. And I think we're still improving in these areas. And that's why, again, I've always been bullish on our side of the hobby. I think that's only going to improve. More information, more authentication and grading, higher quality authentication and grading. That just opens us up to more participation. So it's only good things from there.
How do you guys get items to populate your auctions? Again, they're happening. There's more and more of them, right? So it feels like things are getting diluted. There's plenty of material out there. That's not the question. But when you get, how do you attract people? What makes Heritage different? Which makes you guys like, okay, we're the place versus a Love of the Game or a Golden or a whoever? Why should, and here's my next question to that. If I'm a guy and I have a collection, I'm like going, okay, or I have my grandfather's cards, because it's shocking how many times we still are finding these, attic find type things. It just amazes me that they still pop up. Not maybe as often as they used to, but you still find black swap finds and all these things. You're like, where do these cards come from? Like, where are they? How do you guys say we're the place that you want to do that? Do you all send off cards to third-party authenticator, PSA or whomever, to get graded? If somebody brings you a stack of, this is my grandpa's raw T206 cards, do you guys take it to that level of say, hey, we'll take these, we'll consign them to us, we'll sell them for you, that kind of thing, and grade them and all that? How far do you guys go with that?
Oh, of course. No. So we facilitate the authentication of grading of anything that comes in uncertified, whether it's autographs, jerseys, cards. And I think to answer kind of the first part of that question, I think the thing that really separates Heritage, and look, I've been a collector my whole life, and I was a admirer from afar of Heritage, before I came to work there, just like I was of PSA before I came to work for PSA. It's presentation and expertise and reach to a degree. But if all I would say is, look, for someone who's new to this, right? And let's say the first show they're going to is the National in Cleveland next week. All I would say is, don't take my word for it. Just come over to the Heritage booth and look at the way we present the items, the way they're housed and presented and marketed, that sort of thing, and compare that to everybody else. I think it speaks for itself. I mean, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we are handling other people's valuables, and we want to present them in the best way possible. So again, don't take my word for it. Come to the show, look at our catalogs, look at the high resolution images on the site. I think it speaks for itself. So you want, like, again, when it comes time for a person to sell, you want your items put on the biggest stage and you want it presented in the right way. I think Heritage just does an outstanding job in that respect. But to go along with that, it's the expertise. And so if you look at the staff that Heritage has, and not everyone, the average person in the hobby probably doesn't even know who some of us are, including myself. The staff at Heritage has such an immense depth and expertise, and in a variety of areas. So when those collections come in, whether it's a vintage football jersey collection or a vintage card collection or whatever it is, we have people on staff that know that segment of the market. And for that reason, and going kind of to the second part of your question, because of the expertise we have on staff, we are able to go through collections and figure out, okay, what should be graded or authenticated here, what shouldn't be, what is going to provide the best return for our consigners, because that's the whole thing. It's about the relationship with the consigner and trying to do our best to maximize value for that consigner. And so a part of that is the expertise in helping determine, what do we take out of here? What do we pluck from this collection to have graded to really enhance the return for the consigner? So I think those two things, presentation and expertise, and again, to some degree, the overall reach of the company. I mean, Heritage last year did 1.76 billion across all of our categories in 2023. And we have departments that do coins and comics and dinosaur bones and entertainment, everything. By the way, at the National, a part of our booth is actually going to be dedicated to our entertainment division. So people can come over and see some really amazing props from a variety of classic movies. But in any event, because we service so many other major categories inside of the collectibles field, there's always that potential for crossover where they might be a coin collector or an entertainment collector, but they spot something in our sports division and they want to participate in that too. I think that we are unique in that respect, at least at the level that Heritage is at. I mean, we are the largest collectibles auction house in the world. And because of that, just the kind of the firepower that we have across all categories, there's always that potential that we can get crossover participation, which makes Heritage unique as well.
Have you seen in your short tenure an amazing amount of growth in both registered users, maybe on the sports side, or just growth on the sports side? What does that look like over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, since I've been there, I think you had said earlier in the conversation, kind of, does it mirror kind of the explosion that you see in the graded market? Yes, I think so. I think it's part of that is absolutely true because the overall participation has gone up. And so any major established brand, whether you're a grading service like PSA or a major auction house like Heritage, you're going to just naturally get your sort of portion or percentage of that growth as the entire industry, levels up. So, I think that a big part of it is the overall explosion. But again, inside of that overall increased participation is the new money coming in at the high end of the market. And that, again, I just really think when you think about, as we've talked about earlier, just how important sports is to society, not just in America, but across the world. The more information we can provide, the more comfortable we can make a new buyer feel. It's just going to continue to increase participation across the board. So at the high end of the market, when you see what is paid in other collectible fields for, super high end coins, and certainly in the art world that you see in other tangible asset worlds, the potential in sports, I think, is pretty immense.
Yeah, it's been fascinating since the boom. And I talk about this with almost every guest. I ask them a simple question. From where you sit, Joe, is the hobby dying?
Is that a serious question?
I'm sure people, and I know the answer, it's a rhetorical question almost, because it's like, of course not, and
No.
what you're talking about is just more ammunition that everybody, the hobby's dead. Nobody wants to do this. And I'm like, what? I don't know what they're paying attention to. I don't know what numbers they're looking at that would indicate that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, what I would say is this: is remember, inside of sports, there are lots of subcategories. So, look, if you're a modern card, when I say modern, I mean ultra modern card collector. Look, let's face it. If you look at the numbers, the values of some of that material in the last couple of years, some of that stuff has dropped 70, 80%. So I'm not saying anything that anyone on your show doesn't already know, but every segment of the market goes through ups and downs. But the overall market, again, and what Heritage specializes in, of course, is blue chip collectibles, in all of our respective categories. That stuff has held up incredibly well, no matter what's going on with the modern kind of chase craze and some of this limited edition stuff. That hasn't had much of an impact on the classic vintage stuff. All markets go up and down. I mean, it does kind of, I don't mean to laugh out loud, but I guess, again, it's part of my age. I've been through this cycle now, I guess 3 times, once in the 80s/90s, once in the late 90s, early 2000s, and once, and now in the last several years. All markets go up and down. They go sideways. That's what makes it a market. But the really good stuff long-term, and this is, again, the proof is in the stats and in the facts, that material has performed incredibly well over time. I'm not commenting on whether or not Justin Herbert is going to be the next Super Bowl champion quarterback. I don't know. See, he's really good, but who knows where his stuff is going to go. But the classic established brands in the hobby, the Jackie Robinsons and the Babe Ruths, and the Joe Montanas, even the Tom Brady's, that stuff it's pretty solid, over the long haul.
Tell me if you agree with this. I see the hobby pie growing. The overall pie is growing, period. And is it at the same rate every year or every few months? No, not at all. But I just see a slow growth, just consistent growth in the overall pie. Like, how much is all this stuff? What's the value? What money's coming in? To me, the pie is not shrinking, it's growing. Would you agree with that statement?
I mean, no, there's no question about it. I mean, because now because of this injection of resources in the last several years, kind of during this COVID explosion, there's so many sort of new sources. There's so much new money injected into the market. They're using that money to reach out to brand new customers all over the world, internationally, not just here. Some people, for example, look at Fanatics, right? Some people have been, critical about some of the things that Fanatics has done already. However, if you think about what the potential reach is of a company like Fanatics and what they could do on the positive side, they could introduce collecting to so many millions upon millions of new people. So it's great to have a company like that involved in the hobby now, because they're invested in it. They want to keep it. They want to keep the momentum going. And so I think, again, I know, we're in this world where, people love to voice their opinions on social media, and you use the word trolls earlier. Maybe it's the ghost of Yogi Berra with that quote, but the bottom line is the hobby is being exposed to more people today than it ever has been before. And if you love it like I do and like you do, who could be mad about that? That's good. That's good for the long-term health. You're always going to have short-term ups and downs, surges in certain areas of the market and declines. Again, that's what a market is. I don't care if it's stock or real estate, any market. But for the long-term health, exposure is everything here. So let's get the hobby exposed to more people and help them feel comfortable about participating. And I think we'll see, continued growth over the long haul.
Last topic I want to bring up is the show next week. How many nationals have you been to, Joe?
It's somewhere in the vicinity of about 30. Okay. My first one was in Anaheim, and I believe it was 1984. It may have been 85, but that was my first one. And I've been to every single national since, I guess, about 1999, 2000 to present, and some other ones sprinkled in there, 1991, 96, and some others along the way. But I think it's around 30 that I've been to.
You got me on there. My first one was 1990. So you got me there. That was the only time it was in Arlington. It was here in Texas. The National has become the show, right? I mean, other shows have tried to, the Dallas Card Show, for example, the Philly Card Show, Chantilly, Burbank now, right? There's some really awesome regional shows, but it's hard. I want you to try to articulate why the National is so special and why it continues to just be the kind of show to go to.
Yeah, I mean, it is the annual showcase. It's kind of a lot for those who are familiar with, Comic-Con in the entertainment world, which is it's much more than comics for those that have been there. It's really an entertainment show, but it's the show. And there are lots of other entertainment shows, but there's only one Comic-Con. The same thing in sports. There's a lot of other very good shows in sports, but there's only one National. And I think that the National has an ability to bring a lot of people out that otherwise don't go to any other shows throughout the course of the year. And being, I guess, an old-fashioned guy in this respect, I don't think there's any replacement for in-person interaction. And so I love the National for that reason. I mean, yes, you get to see so many cool things, including at the Heritage booth this year, and you'll be able to walk the floor and just have your mind blown with the material that's out there. But it's that in-person interaction that you just don't get throughout the year. There aren't too many shows to go to. There are some, but being at the National and just seeing all the collectors, all the dealers there, all the grading services, you just get a chance to engage with people face to face. And I don't think that there's any replacement for that.
Yeah, I think totally agree. I think a lot of people don't realize the experience factor that matters for the National, or the things that are all together in one place. And a card show is a card show. Card shows to me haven't changed much in 30 years. They're basically the same. But the National is an experience, and I think that's lost on a lot of people. They minimize that part of it, and they don't just realize that all this is here at one place. It's an experience to go see the things at the Heritage booth, any other booths, get your cards graded right there, and all the stuff that is there that's just unique to that. The presence that the card companies have, the presence that the grading companies have, the auction houses, etc. Yeah, that's in pockets at other places, but it's not like this. And then you add the people into it, obviously, probably from a business standpoint, it's a great opportunity for you guys to showcase your brand and kind of meet new collectors that may have never thought about using an auction house, and kind of reach out that way. A lot of business to business deals and catching up and behind the scenes stuff that happens. You can only do that there. To me, it's like it's unique petri dish of all these things, right, that make the National what it is. And when I hear people talk down about the National, I'm like, then you haven't been, like, because you don't get it, one of the two. And to me, it's my favorite hobby event of the year. It's the first thing that goes on my calendar, from a hobby standpoint. Put my kids' birthdays on the calendar, my anniversary, and then I go, when's the National? All right. You get out the new calendar, 2025. Okay, what am I doing next year? National. All right, there you go. That's on. So it's that important to me, and to a lot of people in the hobby for sure. So it's a great experience to me. It's all about that experience. And I gotta come shake your hand. We've never met in person. I gotta come say hi to you at the show next week. So.
No, I'm really looking forward to it. And you really nailed it. I mean, even at the National, if you go back, 5-10 years ago, even the National, if I'm being, honest about it, the National didn't change for a long time. I mean, at least not in a major way, but the last couple of years, it's completely different. I mean, it's a completely different experience. And I think interactive is the key word. On-site grading, there are, pack breaking, podcasters. I mean, there's all this stuff going on, and then in a room filled with material for everyone. I mean, if you're a modern card collector, there's plenty of modern cards there. If you're into vintage museum quality relics, there's that too, and everything in between. And it's in one spot, and that's the key. It's like it's all brought together in one enormous convention center. But you can get it done all in that week, and it will take some time, because it's hard when you're going around the show. That the time, it's one thing for those who haven't been at the National. I remind myself of this every year. The time just disappears on you. You're in 1 20-minute conversation here, 20 minutes, and it's like the day's over. So make some time. Make sure you allocate enough time to kind of cover it all, but. I feel the same way you do. It's so much fun, and to see it evolve over, multiple decades has been an incredible thing to see.
Yeah, I'm excited this year. Last Cleveland National was 18. We were both there, and then I went in 14, and it's going to be a whole new IX center. So what is that going to look like? I'm curious, excited, to see. I've seen the floor plan and all that. It looks like it's going to be gigantic. And so I'm just excited to go back to Cleveland. Chicago is my favorite National venue, as it is for most people, just because of the convenience of pretty much everything that's around the Rosemont Center there. But I'm excited about this to check it out. I enjoyed the venue at the IX Center in the past Nationals that I've attended there. It's very open, wide aisles, easy to get around. So we'll see what 2024 has in store for us, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you, by the way. I think, like you said, most are too. If they put it in Chicago till the end of time, I would be very, very happy with that. Look, they do the Comic-Con in San Diego every year. It's in San Diego. It's in the same city. People get used to it. And Chicago is incredibly convenient. So, yeah, thumbs up on that if that ever happens.
Well, hopefully Joe's listening. Joe Drelich might be listening. He does listen to the podcast, so we'll see if he hears our from Joe Orlando. Joe, well, from one Joe to another. Come on, hear us out. No, Joe, thank you so much for being with me on the show today. I love the insight. I love the history that you have. As much as I love sports history, I love hobby history too. And you carry a plethora of knowledge in that area. And it's great to pick your brain a little bit. So thank you for being on the show.
No, I've really enjoyed it, Mike. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person next week.
All right. Well, everybody out there, have a great week. If you're going to be at the show, stop me, say hi. Please do. Would love to meet all you guys out there. And yeah, have a great rest of your week. We'll see you at the show next week, and keep collecting.